Hi, good evening. I'm Lonnie Stonich, the Executive Director of FAN, and I'm honored to welcome you to tonight's conversation between Dacher Keltner and Susan Cain. Thanks for joining us. FAN celebrates its 40th anniversary this year, and we're honored to have the robust support of dozens of schools, nonprofits, corporations, families, and individuals from across the country. We are committed to our vision of an informed and compassionate community, and will achieve that vision by presenting fresh ideas that elevate minds, expand hearts, and make the world a better place. We have hundreds of videos of past events archived on our YouTube channel, so be sure to subscribe to get updates when new recordings are posted. And now for some introductions. We are thrilled and honored to welcome back Dacher Keltner, whom we hosted in 2016 for a series of events. Dr. Keltner is a professor of psychology at UC Berkeley and faculty director of the Greater Good Science Center. Dr. Keltner's research focuses on the biological and evolutionary origins of compassion, awe, love, beauty, power, social class, and inequality. He is the co-author of 2 textbooks, as well as the bestsellers Born to be Good, The Compassionate Instinct, and The Power Paradox. He has published hundreds of scientific articles and has written for the New York Times, the London Times, and the Wall Street Journal, among many others. Joining him is Susan Cain, the author of several bestsellers, including Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking, which spent 7 years on the New York Times bestseller list and has been translated into 40 languages. Whew. Her most recent best-selling book is Bittersweet, How Sorrow and Longing Make Us Whole. Susan's writing has appeared everywhere, in particular the New York Times, The Atlantic, the Wall Street Journal, and many other publications. We hosted Susan in 2013 and in 2022, and we're honored to host again. So now let's welcome Dacher Keltner and Susan Cain.
Thank you, Lonnie, for that incredible introduction. It's so fantastic to be here with you again. FAN always hosts such great events. They really stand out. And Dacher is an old friend and one of the best people who I've had the chance to meet in my travels through this world. And it's just amazing to be here with you, Dacher, to talk about this incredible new book, which I will say, a friend of mine actually just texted me the other night. She had no idea that I know you, no idea that we were going to be doing this event tonight together. And she said, I'm on holiday and I'm reading the most incredible book, and it's all about awe. And it was yours. Oh. And she did an amazing question about the book, which we're going to get to in a minute. But first, I wanted to share that. So I want to start with what could be a boring question, except that nothing about this book is boring. And the question is just like what awe is. Yeah. Can you define it? Which I thought you did a great job of in the book. And I would like to just ground everyone who hasn't had a chance to read it yet.
Yeah. It's actually a simple question and a very hard question. And people have been grappling with this for millennia. When you think about the people writing in the spiritual traditions, Julian of Norwich, and trying to kind of make sense of what it is like to encounter the divine, that's partially awe, and words were hard to find. And so in defining awe, I define awe as an emotion that you feel subjectively in response to vast things that are large in scale and are bigger than your frame of reference, and that are mysterious, right? And I love the word mystery, and that came to me late in writing the book, that we just can't make sense of. And for those who are interested in the efforts of our cultures to make sense of awe, I really was astounded by Edmund Burke. And, in the Age of Enlightenment, he wrote this very important book that said, the sublime is powerful and it's obscure. And I translated that to contemporary terms to say, our awe is an emotion we feel when we encounter vast and mysterious things.
There's, do you know the song Diamonds and Rust, the Joan Baez song?
Probably, but I can't call it up by memory.
Okay, so it's this famous song that she wrote, and it's all about her affair with Bob Dylan that she had when they were young, just starting out. And there's this line in the song. She's talking about like the height of their love affair, and there's this line where she says, speaking strictly for me, we both could have died then and there.
Yeah.
And I'm always struck by that line. Like we've all had that feeling of like, you haven't experience that's so great and
Yeah.
so sublime, and your reaction is, well, I don't even need to live anymore. Like
Yeah.
this is it. And that's actually kind of a paradoxical reaction, because you might say, well, life has gotten so great, this is exactly where I would need to keep going forever.
Yeah.
So I just wonder what you make of that line in light of everything that you've learned.
Well, in writing about awe and studying it scientifically and reading the great scholarly traditions that have written about it, and in interviewing a lot of interesting people, one of the things that keeps coming up in a dimension of the experience of awe is the dissolving of the self, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the psychedelic literature, they call it ego death. Julian of Norwich, writing about her love for Jesus, said, "I am nothing." Ralph Waldo Emerson, "all mean egotism vanishes." And it's paradoxical because these are all moments when we're transcending the self, the worldly self, in awe, and they're full of joy, right? And we feel like we can let go or die, metaphorically. And what a striking property of the human condition, that when we let go of the self, it's all the joy begins. And that's what is right at the core of awe.
And do you think the experience can stay with you? And I'll tell you why I ask this, because I keep having this recurring experience. It happens again and again. It happens especially when I listen to really intense music. Most recently, I've had this obsession with a Chopin nocturne in B flat minor, and I hear this music. I'm like, this is so beautiful. I feel like the music is saying that it doesn't matter that we're all going to die one day.
Yeah.
Like that's what the music is conveying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you stop listening to it, so 3 minutes after it's done, I'm like, well, I don't really feel that way exactly anymore, but you do feel slightly changed by the experience. And it's like you accumulate enough of them, maybe it changes you permanently. What do you think?
Yeah, this is one of the deepest questions about these transcendent experiences like awe, which is when you talk to people, music is very interesting because it probably has very specific temporal properties that transcend our usual conceptions of time, more so than, say, visual art or other sources, or nature, other sources of awe. But, it's such a deep question, Susan. You've given me 2 questions I can't answer, so thanks. But, people say that experiences of awe change their lives.
Yeah.
Right. When I teach awe, and our audience could do this, you think about a time when you felt awe as a child. And when I think about it, I think about camping near the Pacific Ocean with my brother and my dad when I was 5. And it just comes up like your Chopin example. And I feel that experience in me now. So the question is, how does that work? Well, we don't know the answer. And it's one of the great questions. Maybe certain neurophysiological patterns are set in the brain from awe that then recur when things similar happen. We do know, and it's cool, we did a study, veterans go rafting, they enjoy a day of awe on a river, and their PTSD is diminished for a week by 30%. So that means it's lasting for a week.
Wow.
There's recent work with psychedelics showing benefits of festivals with psychedelics last for a year, right? You feel kinder toward people. So it's one of the great mysteries. How long does this last? It's a great question.
So let's talk about what our major awe triggers are. The first one you talk about is moral beauty, but then there's 7 others of them. So I don't know how you want to take that, because we could do one at a time, or give us an overview, whatever direction you'd like to go.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope I don't irritate people out there. There are 8 sources of awe. Of course, there are many more, but so I gave, you asked for a definition. Awe is the emotion we feel with vast mystery. It's a feeling. Well, that doesn't tell us enough. Like, what is it about, right? What am I aware of? What context am I in? And taking a cue from William James, who really felt that the way you get experience in scholarship, and you're going to like this, Susan, is stories, is narratives. I could ask you, check your checklist, does this give you awe? And instead we gathered stories from 26 different countries, which I'm really proud of, you know, from Mexico to India to Poland to the US, you know, China, Japan, et cetera. And we took a long time to classify them. And what we find, what I call the 8 wonders, is you find awe in moral beauty, nature, collective movement, you know, Chicago Bears fans when they're all cheering for the Bears, music, art, spirituality, and then 2 surprises, which were big ideas, right? Somebody writing about big data, oh my God, you know, and then life and death, which meant a lot to me writing the book, that we feel awe with the beginning of life and its end. So those are our 8 wonders. And to moral beauty, you know, what surprised us is that's the most common source of awe around the world, is other people's kindness, how courageous the average person can be, how they overcome obstacles. A mom in Ireland writing about her daughter born with club feet and then watching her dance on the stage and just awash in tears and goosebumps, right? And virtuosity, like I saw Yo-Yo Ma play, or, you know, so it's so striking to me that awe is found in the wonders of people nearby, which we often forget.
Why were you surprised that moral beauty was the most common source of awe?
Yeah, I was surprised because, you know, like everybody in our audience, you know, when you look at the news and you study Instagram and you look at the content of, you know, publications, you can't imagine that what is most moving and sublime is other people. And this is a battle I fought for a long time, that people have a lot of goodness in them. So that was surprising. And it was, I think I was surprised because, you know, religion has dominated so much of the writing about awe for a long time, right? Until the Age of Enlightenment. And I thought, well, you know, it'll mainly be a religious emotion. And in fact, that's just part of the story. So it caught me off guard. And it caught me off guard how commonplace this feeling of awe about moral beauty is. You know, just going out into the streets. I was out in the streets 2 days ago. I was going to get some chapstick, and this undergrad at Berkeley just gave $30 to an unhoused person. Here you go. I was just like, wow, you know, so there's a lot of it out there.
I had an experience with it that I actually just wrote about this in my newsletter. It happened a few weeks ago. I was on my way to play tennis, and I realized I had forgotten my water bottle. So I pulled into a gas station, and I asked the attendant if they sold water, and he said, "I'm sorry, we don't have a store." And then he looked at me for a moment, and he said, "Wait a moment." And he goes to the back of the gas station, and he comes back holding 2 Poland Spring bottles, which he had found somewhere. And I took out my wallet to pay him, and he said, no, don't do that. You have the face of my mother. Please take them."
Oh, wow.
And this man, he was wearing a turban. I'm guessing he was Sikh, and he spoke with a very heavy accent. So I'm guessing it's been a really long time since he's seen his mother, and just this moment of unnecessary kindness, like it brought tears to my eyes, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since then. And I do think those moments are just incredibly transporting.
You know, it's striking to me too, Susan. You know, you're a gifted storyteller, as our audience is here to appreciate. But your story just gave me goosebumps and a little bit of tearing, and it's so striking to me that these stories of moral beauty, in particular, have this wildly contagious quality to them.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, and it doing the work, you know, writing this book, doing the science. Sometimes with science, just like when you write your books, it kind of opens your eyes. And wow, you know, moral beauty, just studying it intensively. Now, when I go out into the streets and just walk through, yeah, there's a lot of tension and so forth, but there's a lot of kindness out there to appreciate.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the fact that that was the most common source of awe that you found feels like a straight line from your last book about Born to be Good and human kindness.
Yeah, a recurrent theme.
And what about collective effervescence? Can you tell us about that?
Oh man, you know, this one probably a lot of us have lost profound touch with it over the pandemic, but is collective effervescence. So that highfalutin term or phrase is from Emile Durkheim. Mm-hmm. And he felt, this great sociologist, that the key to spiritual experience was moving in unison, right? That once we start to move in unison, our minds start to join, we have a shared attention of something, it feels sacred to us, and we have religion. But the literature on awe and collective effervescence broadens it out. And what it tells us is, first of all, we find collective effervescence in dance. And so I write about the new science of dance. We find it in how we walk through the streets in busy cities. People will start to move together in collaborative ways. Mm-hmm. We find it in sports. I love sports. And, you know, we often forget about how transporting sports are. And then religion. And what's striking to me, you know, Susan, is this is just wired into us. Little babies, when they hear music, they start bobbing their head to the music with other adults. And pretty soon they're like, we're all part of a culture, you know? Yeah. There are a lot of studies showing when we share awe-inspiring things like a sporting event or a piece of music, our physiologies just become the same, right? Those veterans rafting in our studies, their cortisol levels, stress levels became the same. So we're always merging with each other. And in those moments of merging, it's like, God, we're just we're one organism, right? I think people feel it really strongly at music, like moments of music where you're at a concert, you suddenly are feeling the moment and everybody around you feels, you know. What's an experience at a concert you've had of collective effervescence?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, you know, I'm a crazy Leonard Cohen fanatic.
Uh-huh.
So I've been both to his concerts and then also to his memorial concert. And I felt it so intensely both times, even though those aren't exactly dancing concerts, but they're like, I think people who love Leonard Cohen, he's like a spiritual figure for them, for us. So those have been some of the most intense moments of my life, being in those places.
And what it tells us is, and it's so interesting that it's that shared being physical together and shared attention, that there's something magical and effervescent about it. So it's wonderful to write about it. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also curious if you think that it can happen in a virtual environment. And I ask this partly because, you know, a bunch of people sent in questions even before the event started, and people are expressing concern about whether our increasingly virtual lives make it so that we're going to be experiencing awe less and less. And on the one hand, I think that's probably right. And then on the other hand, I keep thinking of like these viral videos that go around sometimes where it feels like you're experiencing collective effervescence by watching them. And one that I'm thinking about, I wonder if you've seen this. It's a flash mob of a symphony orchestra playing Ode to Joy in a plaza in Spain. And it's like, I have to send this to you. We should actually put it in the after hours, maybe just show it to people. It's incredible. And it's really well filmed. So the camera shows you just like the awe and the joy and the tears on people's faces as they're listening to this music. And I've watched that like 27 times at least. Yeah. And I feel collective effervescence each time, even though I'm sitting in my office by myself. So what do you think?
Well, we derive a lot of awe, and it's so fascinating to think about the mind and what basic images and stimuli out there bring us awe. Collective patterns, you know, flocks of birds, people dancing, you know, people often break into tears when they see members of a group dance, right? So that's a source of awe. The broader question is a critical one of, you know, what about the new technologies? And on, you know, it almost was, it was comical, but sad that we gathered 2,600 stories from around the world. What brings you awe? No one mentioned their smartphone. No one mentioned virtual reality. No one mentioned a Google search or Google Maps, right? And I think that in the broadest sense, you know, these technologies work against awe, right? You need other people around very often. You need to be immersed. You need to be out in the world. They're too small. They're gamed, and the algorithms direct us toward. They don't allow us to encounter mysteries for the most part. They find solutions. But at the same time, you know, these new technologies, you can share music from around the world. You can share visual art that was inaccessible before the new technologies, ideas about people. And, you know, Jonah Berger's worth noting here as a scientist, which is people love sharing awe-inspiring content digitally. They love it.
Yep.
And ironically, some of our big technology companies, they don't design for that. And so I issue the challenge, like, let's design for a bit more awe, because it's pretty deep in us to want it.
So what about for you, out of these different awe triggers that you cataloged, which are the ones that work most reliably for you?
Yeah, you know, Susan, and I think this is a good question for everybody, which is, you know, the 8 wonders are in a way a menu or a roadmap, right? You can, if you want more awe, and there's a lot of good reasons to want more awe right now, you know, it's so good for you. You know, is it moral beauty or nature, or music or spirituality, and so on? And the ones I am astounded by moral beauty every day. I spent 25 years coding facial expressions and laughter and vocalizations and touch. And when I walk outside, it's just like Soren Kierkegaard said, you know, as I walk through Berkeley or wherever I am, like, being in public allows me the chance encounters of the significance of insignificant things. And it has just, the idea of moral beauty, you know, I walk by a preschool every day to go to work, and kids do incredible things. You know, they're like, they're both monsters and full of moral beauty, and it's astounding. You know, just watching people, nature is a good one for me. I like ideas, you know, so I'm always like, God, you know, evolution or free markets or whatever. So, and then I struggle with others, and wrote about that in the book. Like, you know, spirituality, was an interesting one for me to dig into. How about you? What are your big wonders of life?
I'll tell you in a second, but I just have to tell you that, like, as I was listening, I just had what to me was an epiphany. I don't know if it is to you, or like if this is really obvious to you, but the fact that moral beauty is this big one for you. You told me years ago about your beloved brother who passed away a year ago. And I remember the exact words you used to describe him. You said to me, he was the most morally beautiful person I ever knew.
Yeah.
Did you, like, were you thinking of those words when you used that phrase to describe one of these 8 wonders? Because it's always stayed with me that you called that, like, how amazing he was, and that you used those words to describe him.
Yeah, you know, I thought about just human goodness, but I kept coming back to almost the aesthetic qualities of people's beauty, their morality, that a kind act of generosity, that a courageous act of speaking truth to power has this beauty to it, right? It just feels sort of pleasing to the visual senses and our moral senses. And so I think it was, you know, a lot of this book, and it came out of talking with you in part, Susan, those years ago, is intertwining scholarship of different kinds with my experience of grief, and like making sense of what my brother meant to me. And all I could say was he was morally beautiful in what he gave me.
Yeah, and you touched on it in the book, the way he would defend. There is a girl who was bullied, who was like 2 years older than he was, and he defended her from the bullies who were much older. That example always really stuck with me. And it sounds like he was doing that all the time.
Yeah, we were in this Lord of the Flies school, you know, back when bullying was not a concern of teachers, and they probably softly encouraged it in the kind of school I went to, which was pretty out of control. And, you know, this girl was bullied like, you know, Clockwork Orange type bullying. And my brother, I remember he was escorting her to lunch, and the kids were just mobbing around her. And he literally like cleared out a space of older kids, put up his hand, and like let this girl walk past. And It's interesting how long these experiences last. Your question earlier, Susan, like, I think that's one of the defining experiences of my life. And I can call it to mind with vivid detail. And that's what's fascinating about these awe experiences, is they mean so much. So thanks for asking about that. It was life defining.
Absolutely. And okay, so you were asking me what my reliable awe triggers are. Definitely music, as I was.
How do you listen to music to find awe? Like, do you do it in a contemplative way? Do you go to big events? How do you do it?
I do it in a contemplative way. I mean, every so often I would, pre-pandemic, go to a concert or whatever, but that was never the thing for me. It was more like I would stumble across a song or a piece or whatever that I loved and just like really tune in. And, what always happens to me when it's a really profound one is that I find myself making a gesture of prayer as I'm listening. Yeah. And I've been an agnostic all my life.
Yeah.
And really only in the last year or two have I started realizing that the experience I have when I listen to music is exactly the same experience that you could call religion. It's just by another language. It's another language for the exact same experience.
Thank you for bringing that up. And it's funny, in writing this book, I found myself often, bowing and the like. And I love, one of the things that I love most about the science of awe is the body of awe. And Walt Whitman has this great quote. He's one of my heroes, very awe-inspired writer, to say the least.
And awe-driven writer too.
Woo, and moral beauty and everything, But he, late in his life, he did these conversations, and he said, somebody asked him about the soul, and we used to talk a lot more about the soul. And I wish our young people talked more about their souls, right? We do have a subjective experience of the soul.
Yeah.
And Whitman said, if the soul is not in the body, where is the soul? And the science of awe is finding, when you tell people, like, what's the most meaningful encounter with music or moral beauty, what did you feel in your body? And they're like, oh my God, I started crying. I got goosebumps. I just felt like bowing. I felt like embracing things. And that is the body of the soul, right? And it has this interesting evolutionary history, a very interesting neurophysiology to it, that awe points us to, which was fun to uncover. And it's interesting, you would do the Anjali Mudra in, the Hindu tradition very much has that quality.
Yeah. And okay, I want to talk about goosebumps in a second, because this is a big one. But before we do, I'm just going to say, with the music, you were asking me, like, do I listen to it alone or in concerts? I've noticed that every time I have one of those experiences, it's immediately followed by the desire/compulsion to share it with someone who will experience it the same way that I just did. And I have a friend, the writer Emily Esfahani Smith, and she has really similar taste in music. So we're always sending each other music. We're just texting it to each other constantly. And we call it the repeat treatment, because we each have these songs that we'll listen to, over and over again. But yeah, I wondered about that too. Like, why the compulsion to immediately, like, you wish that every other human in the world could have the experience that you just had?
Because one of the most astounding properties of the mental state of awe is embedded in this experience, which is, Jane Goodall thought chimpanzees had early forms of awe. I agree. So this has been evolving for millions of years. And within this structure in your mind is the sense that I am part of a collective, right?
Yeah.
And one of my favorite trends in our findings is, no matter where you feel awe, you can feel awe at a lightning storm, as I did in the High Sierras backpacking, like it was coming near us, shooting down electric boat. And in that experience, you feel united with other people. And part of that is to share, right? And awe has this just kind of built-in design to it of like, I'm going to share awareness of this experience. And what a great thing. What a good thing to think about as you share content online.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned the chimpanzees, because just the other day on Twitter, of all places, I saw this amazing, awe-inspiring video of a dog listening to music, and the dog was like going like, like it was like a complete state of bliss and awe. It was amazing. Okay, but I want to talk about Goosebumps for a sec, because
yeah,
I told you about my friend who was reading your book, having no idea that we were about to have this conversation, and she said to me, do you think that some people are more prone to feeling awe than other people? And she said it takes her husband a lot. Like he doesn't experience awe that often. It takes a lot for him to get there.
Yeah.
And she feels like she's in that state all the time. And I wonder if this has something to do with goosebumps, with one's proneness to experience goosebumps, whether that's connected to all of this.
Very much, So the simple answer, and then, the deeper implications, is that awe is this emotion shaped by evolution. Evolution works on individual variation. There's variation in everything. And there's a lot of variability in awe. In our research, some people, you ask them 14 consecutive days, you feel awe? They're like, no. And then other people are like, I've got 42 today, and they're doing the dishes and, whoa, cleaning out the garbage. It's amazing, So there's a lot of variability, and it's fascinating and to think about what it means. Goosebumps are one of the physiological manifestations of awe. Yeah. There are these, and it's amazing. There are these little muscles around your hair follicles. And when you hear a great piece of music, or you see two people hugging from different cultures and you're moved, you tear up, and you get this big rush of sensations up your back and to your head. And that's part of awe. And people vary on those. And, I have to say, and I hope everybody in the audience checks into ASMR, which is basically goosebumps, autonomous sensory meridian response. So powerful and hungry are we for awe that now young people watch these videos to experience what they call ASMR, autonomous sensory meridian response. And these are videos of like people's lips smacking and cleaning ears with Q-tips and moving forward. It's all about merging with others in a slightly strange way. So I love goosebumps and hope we can feel more of them as we move forward as a culture.
One way I reliably feel them is this past year I've started sending out weekly newsletters to my readers, and people write me back the most intense, heartfelt letters. They're incredible. And so many of them give me goosebumps. And it's something about the stories people share, or I think it's like the moment of connection that you feel. It's something about that. And I find myself like, I try to write back to as many letters as I can. And I'm always writing back and saying, your letter gave me goosebumps. And it almost starts to feel like a form letter, but it's not. It's like, that's what I really am experiencing.
You need to design a little emoji, like the goosebump emoji.
I need a goosebump emoji. Totally. So what would you say to somebody who doesn't experience a lot of awe and would like to, or wants their husband to? Like, is there a sort of surefire way to get there, or is it different for everyone?
No, it's different for everyone, but there are pretty reliable sources of it, right? I think the first thing we all should be thinking about, and I'm working on this in schools with younger people too, is I think just the design of contemporary living works against awe. We don't wander. We don't seek out mysteries or things we don't know. We gravitate to certain things. We don't stop and just take a moment to observe things. So get into a mindset of awe that I write about in the book. In particular, Rachel Carson has a beautiful essay on how to teach your child and all of us to wonder that fits that. And then I think, if you're looking for more awe, and it's very good for you, from your heart to your immune system to your brain, look at the 8 wonders in the book and think about like your question, Susan, what's easy for you? Is it the walk? Is it gardening? Is it listening to gospel music? Is it reading certain poets? Is it particular kinds of music? Go find the easy ones and build on it, and then find one that's challenging and see where it takes you. So And we have at ggia.berkeley.edu and our Science of Happiness podcast, listened to by hundreds of thousands. We have a lot of awe practices now. People are like, how do I get this? So we got a lot of awe practices.
Can you say again how people can find those? I bet a lot of people would like that.
Yeah. Science of Happiness podcast at greatergood.berkeley.edu and then ggia.berkeley.edu. One of them is just the awe walk. Turn your regular walk into a source of awe. And we figured it out and have easy instructions, and it matters a lot.
So there were also two other aspects, let's say, that you mentioned in the book that are, it sounds like, are correlated with frequently experiencing awe. And I was struck by these two because I've read about them separately as being involved with psychedelic experiences. So that was interesting. So one is you link it to the personality trait of openness of experience.
Yeah.
And the other has to do with reduced activity and the default mode network. So can we talk about each of those separately? Maybe first, can you define what openness of experience means? Because it's a little different from, I think, the way it sounds in lay terms.
Yeah, well put and good eye. It's really hard to, and I really worked hard with the science and the stories that I gathered writing this, like, what is the core unfolding of awe? It's so hard to, you have this big experience and you're crying and goosebumps and hugging people at a wedding or whatever it may be. And you're like, what's going on here, right? So we relied on a lot of techniques, or I did. And one of them is just what William James, saintly tendencies. You really want to serve people. One of them is really openness to the world. And what that means is open to experience is the kind of the sense of identity that develops out of this, which is you are curious about people, you're interested in people's minds and their emotions, you like new things, you're not frightened by mystery, you like culture and music and art, right? You like novelty. And awe, in so many ways, you almost feel it in our bodies, right? It opens us up. And suddenly you're like, God, coming out of an awe experience, other people just seem more beautiful and worth asking questions of, right? Coming out of an awe experience, you may look anew at the New York Times or whatever you're reading and like, God, this is also fascinating. Other kinds of music will feel really interesting. So I think a lot of our culture has narrowed our attention and really constricted it. In schools today, kids are way too narrow and constricted. And what we need to do is open up the mind and attention. And awe is a great pathway to it.
So it's interesting because it sounds almost like it goes in both directions, that people who are high in openness to experience are more likely to have awe experiences, but also having awe experiences makes you more prone to openness to experience in general.
Yeah. When you study experience, which is one of the hardest things to study in scholarship, like how's it all unfold? And we always give up and say, it's going in every direction.
Interesting.
And the really open to experience person, will feel a lot of awe. But one of the key findings from psychedelics was Roland Griffiths, wow, a little bit of psychedelic psilocybin, 2 months later, I'm more open to experience. I'm more open to other people, more open to new ideas. It's a good thing. So it's going in many directions.
So let's talk about the physiology of awe. We talked about goosebumps, but can we talk about the default mode network?
Yeah, this is kind of a starring figure right now in the psychedelic literature.
Yep.
And which I'm happy to talk about it, whenever, and because a lot of people are interested in it these days. It's so interesting. And the older I get, the brain is incredible. It's 80 billion neurons. Each one's connected 15,000 ways. It's mind-blowing in its complexity. But those data are really useful for certain kinds of questions. And one of the really interesting questions that arose for me in writing awe is, when we feel awe, we just feel like we're disappearing, right? And when you ask people what's awe like, they're like, I vanished. I totally vanished. I was no longer there, or I'm dissolving, or myself is small, or Julian of Norwich, I am nothing. It dissolves. And I'm more persuaded by neurophysiology that shows self structures dissolve. And in point of fact, the default mode network is big chunks of your cortex right here and on the side. And the default mode network is tracking all the processes relevant to the ego and me. Mm-hmm. How am I doing at work? Am I rising in status? What are my goals? Self-criticism, right? What's amazing, Susan, for me, is little bursts of awe quiet the default mode network. Mm-hmm. A study in Holland, you see beautiful nature imagery, the default mode network quiets. Same result in Japan, same in the United States. Meditation and awe, psychedelics and awe, quiet down what Aldous Huxley rightly called this interfering, nagging voice of the ego. And, I think we live in a time where that voice is often too loud. We're always critical and wondering, what's going on Instagram, and awe frees us from that, which I think is good news.
I mean, it's interesting because then later in the book, when you're talking about spirituality as one of the triggers of awe, and you talked about the mysticism scale by Hood, and I went and I looked it up online, and I was just looking through it and thinking, and so much of it is describing like what I experience when I listen to music or other kinds of awe states, and I think this gives a completely different perspective on what spirituality actually is.
Yeah. What an astute question. And I hope everybody's reflecting on that. Our debates about spirituality 10, 15 years ago were semantic debates, right? About what is the afterlife? What is God? What are the 4 criteria to call yourself a Christian, etc. And then as much as I admire the new atheists, if you will, of Christopher Hitchens and Dawkins, they blasted at religion and said it's bad. That's absurd, because religion has its problems like every human institution, but it is a human universal to feel spirit, right? Not everybody does, but a lot of people do. 81% of Americans do. And what I find so revealing about your question is, and awe, the science of awe allows us to have this conversation, which was William James's intention when he wrote Varieties of Religious Experiences. Mm-hmm. It's so human to feel a sense of the divine, that there's primary good, life-giving forces in the world, spirit. Some people may find it listening to music like you. A lot of people do. Some people find it gardening their roses. I find it backpacking with my daughter, where, we're hard-nosed skeptics. And the minute we're in the Sierras, all we're talking about is the spirit and the soul, mm-hmm. And so that's thrilling to me, that this can be a venue for conversations about spirit. We need them. They have been clouded by, polarizing debates, but it's just human to feel. And so tell me how you feel spirit or sense spirit when you listen to music.
Oh, I mean, it's just like there's certain music where you feel a tidal wave of love. That's the only way I can think of to describe it. And such an intense connection to and gratitude to the musician for being able to produce something so beautiful, and just a connection to all the humans who have ever had the emotions that the music is expressing. It's like, and as I said at the beginning, also this feeling of doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that everyone I love is going to die, including me. It's okay. It's like the music is saying that's okay.
Yeah. Yumi Kendall, whom I interviewed for the book, is a cellist in the Philadelphia Symphony. And she spoke just like you, like she gets out on stage, 2,000 people. She starts literally kind of vibrating with spirit. And she's like, man, this has been going on musics have been evolving for 80,000 years. The archaeological record says it unites us all. When she plays as part of history, she's like, it's spiritual.
Yeah.
So listen to more music.
Well, I actually wanted to ask you a little more about the neurophysiology of all this because,
Sure.
okay, so you're talking about, and it's related to what we were just saying. So we're talking about the default mode network becomes suppressed, I guess is the right way to say it.
Yeah.
But you also talked in the book about how with positive experiences of awe, like that is then related, that the default mode network at that point connects to the reward networks. Do I
Yeah.
understand that correctly? And what I wanted to know is, does it also connect to hormones and other
Yeah.
aspects of the brain that have to do with love
Yeah.
and
Very much.
unconditional love?
Very much so. We know. So, this is hard research to do, the neurophysiology of awe, but it's just starting to make progress. And that default mode network shuts down. And like you nicely summarized, Susan, structures, the ventral striatum and nucleus accumbens, the reward circuitry is activated, dopamine. And dopamine is often misrepresented. It really is about exploration and openness. Like, I want to find more of this, right? And then what happens as you move into the brainstem and the glands of the hormonal system is oxytocin is released, at least in a couple of studies. Oxytocin is this merging neuropeptide. And let's not forget the vagus nerve, which I've studied for a long time. Big bundle of nerves in your chest, starts at the top of your spinal cord, helps you vocalize, slows your heart rate, helps with digestion. Really, when it's activated, it's like that warm feeling in your chest of being open and loving, and awe activates that. So it's a remarkable neurophysiology. But the big mystery to me, and we're learning more, is the stuff we've been talking about. Like, how does the brain represent this sense of it's okay if I die, or I'm connected to everybody? We don't know. And psychedelics, that literature will help us start to make progress on that question of kind of what's the oceanic mind and brain like.
Right. And what about the sounds of awe? You talk about that also.
All right. I'm going to test you, Susan. I'm going to count to 3.
Uh-oh.
And you give me your best awe sound. 1, 2, 3.
I don't know, because I read the book, so all I'm thinking is, whoa.
There we go.
But I read about that, so
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, sounds of emotion are profound. They're incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, our vocal apparatus blows my mind. I get awe-inspired every time I think about it. Just brain chemistry, triggering muscle contractions, producing air particles, go through your vocal cords, and out comes music. That's astounding. But we have an old language of emotion. And in fact, a lot of mammals, horses, bats, non-human primates, dogs, cats, have these vocalizations of emotion, right? And so we started to study what we call vocal bursts, little vocal sounds of emotion, by asking people, like I asked you, what is a sound of awe? And they'd be like, whoa.
Yeah.
How about love? How about, fear? Ah! How about ecstasy? Oh, whatever it is, right? We play those sounds to people all over the world and have them guess what emotion just happened. And this is one of many surprises about the science of awe, which is that's the most universal sound of emotion is, whoa. It's easy to identify around the world. And it gets really interesting when you think about music, because there's a lot of new science saying the sounds of emotions like awe, that whoa, start to become the structure of different kinds of music, like choral singing, sacred chanting, certain kinds of gospel music or rock and roll that really reaches heights and gives us awe, has these properties of the emotional vocalizations. And it's a really interesting new literature.
I know that we're supposed to start taking audience questions soon. So I just want to end, if it's okay, and tell me whether or not you want to go there, but I want to end this part of the evening, if you do want to, by just asking you a little more about Rolf and your brother, and the role that his life and death played in your life's work in general, but in particular, this book and this work.
Yeah, thank you. As you know, Susan, we write books for many different reasons. And 4 years ago to this day, I, at about this hour, was sitting by Rolf's bed with my whole family. He had had 2 years of colon cancer and was soon to die. And Rolf had been, and you were one of the first persons, I think 3 or 4 years ago, I spoke of this way, like and it was an epiphany in that conversation we had, like, he's the most morally beautiful person I know. He, big, strong guy, protected anybody who was being threatened, taught speech to very poor kids in the Sierras, passed away. And it was a moment, it was the big mystery for me. Like, where did he go? What is life? What is my life? What is the meaning of this all? And I felt awe, as a lot of people do when they watch loved ones go. It's a big mystery. And in all honesty, I started writing this book in grief. I gathered a bunch of books that are sacred to me, Lao Tzu and Walt Whitman and so forth, and Susan Cain and others. And I just started reading and writing about him, and it emerged into stories of our brotherhood together, and then his passing and my hope, when he died, I was, like a lot of people, losing a sibling is really hard. It's life destabilizing. And I was destabilized. And frankly, it was so ironic. I was just out of my mind, and my family was saying, like, you got to go find awe. You've lost it, man. And, this is your life's work. And so I went to mountains and musical performances and spiritual stuff and talked to people in a way to rebuild what my brother gave me, which was moral beauty. And it changed my life, and my hope, Susan, it's been astonishing. We don't allow for awe much in the way we handle death in the West. If you're not a religious person like me, it's not there in this consecration of a person's life. Nothing compared to like Mexican Day of the Dead, where they spend years honoring the dead. And this was my effort to do that. And this conversation and your question is to say, everybody has, just honor the people around you love, and because it is fleeting, and then keep them with you when they go, which is what I've learned.
It was actually my father who started exposing me to music at a very young age. He was the one who taught me to love music so much. And when he died a couple of years ago, I still remember, it's like the night he was dying and after, I remember listening to music as if like I was looking for him there. And he wasn't there. Like I didn't find him there, but it was like I found something else, that there's something in that experience that is love itself, or the ultimate beauty itself, when you have a true awe experience. And so it's not the love of the particular person who you're mourning, but you can tap into some kind of a river of love at that moment. I don't mean to say it makes mourning go away, but it's a balm.
It is. And it's how I know we're almost at time, but my brother and I used to hike in the Sierras, and I just like had to go to this part of the Eastern Sierras where he and I last hiked. And when I saw the mountain ridge, it was just him, like, being with me. And what I've learned through awe is people stay with us always in such incomprehensible ways that is sublime.
Well, thank you so much for sharing about that in particular, and for everything, like all this amazing work. I just feel like it answers so many questions that so many of us have had throughout our lives, the most precious moments of our lives. You're answering for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan. What an honor to be, and what a friendly privilege to be in conversation with you. One of my favorite voices.
Boy, that hour just flew by. What a generous and just open and connected conversation. I'm grateful to both of you, Susan, for your willingness to come and take part here. Dacher, for your brilliant suggestion to ask Susan to come and be your partner. Some might say that was a no-brainer, but boy, that was that was just beautiful. Thank you so much. I want to remind people we've been posting in chat. So if you've had chat closed, that was probably a mistake. So open up chat. We've been posting in there. After Hours is going to start at 8:05. After Hours, you buy a copy of Dacher's book, Awe, which is incredible, from our bookseller. The link is right there. They'll send you a link in the email receipt to register for After Hours. After Hours, you come, it's a Zoom meeting, cameras are on, you can ask your own questions. Dacher is going to spend another hour with us answering questions and having just more conversation. What an opportunity. And on top of that, when you come to After Hours, Fan is going to be giving away an additional copy for free of Awe to people at After Hours. I mean, not that you need motivation anyway, but wow, I'm sure you all have someone who could use a copy. So come hang out with us. It's going to be great. There's a couple questions. I'll go with the upvoted one. The most upvoted one are certain people predisposed to be able to experience awe more often?
Yeah, definitely. It's probably 30% of the story is just we have these individual differences due to genes and life contexts, family background that make us prone to awe. And they, as Susan astutely observed, they tend to be kind of people who are open to a lot of things to begin with, and they like novelty, and they find awe a little bit more easily.
Another question, is there a difference between awe alone? So if you're solo in nature, let's say you're listening to music, versus awe communally, awe with others, it seems that maybe there's something to the human connection aspect that's unique about that experience of awe. That's
profound. And I wish I had a good answer to that question. And that's exactly what I want to study next. I was with Malcolm Clemens Young, who's the dean of Grace Cathedral, and he said, there's praying is one thing, or being in, but when you're with a group of people, it's just qualitatively different. And I think the same is true of watching a sporting event or listening to music. Nature may be different, right? So we don't know, and I'm eager to find out.
Well, last time you were with us back in 2016, you dropped a little hint that maybe you're going to be thinking about writing a book on awe. And then 6 years later, here you are. I don't want to wait 6 years for the next one.
Thank you.
You gave us a little hint right there. And I bet there's a couple other things you're thinking about as well. So we'll find out more at After Hours. Susan, we love you. You're welcome back in Fanland anytime. You can come read your grocery list, whatever you want. Fine with us. Thank you so much for your generosity. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Susan.